Do Jehovah's Witnesses face persecution for their beliefs? Is the persecution they face evidence that they have the one true religion? And is this persecution likely to increase in severity in the near future? That's what I'll be talking about on this week's episode of the Jexit podcast. Hello and welcome to the Jexit podcast. I'm your host Riley, a former Jehovah's Witness who left the religion in 2019. Before we get started, I'd just like to tell you about the inspiration for this week's episode. So a couple of days ago, my friend Celeste posted a TikTok where she explained that things are going really well for her at the moment. But at the same time, she feels like she should be sad about something. It's like a niggling thought in the back of her mind. I guess you could compare it to that feeling you get when you go shopping, you do all your shopping, leave the shop, but you feel like there's something you forgot to buy. So after watching her TikTok, I decided to make a response to it because what she was describing was something that sounded quite familiar to me. I'll leave a link to my response in the description below. But essentially, I said that as Jehovah's Witnesses, we were taught that we're constantly facing persecution, which is ultimately instigated by Satan the devil. And Satan is so intent on making life difficult for us as a way to get us to stop worshipping Jehovah, that if we ever feel that things are going right in our lives, it means that we're doing something wrong, or that we're in some way not practicing the religion correctly. Because if we were, Satan would be targeting us. I remember being taught that many, many times as a Jehovah's Witness. And that's not something that's unique to me and my own experience. I remember hearing this over and over again at the Kingdom Hall. Now, as I'm sure you know, once you leave the JW religion and you stop believing in it, it still takes a while for you to undo the for lack of a better expression, mental programming that comes along with the religion. So on a conscious level, you don't believe it anymore. But on a subconscious level, certain beliefs and mindsets and attitudes stay with you, and it takes a while for you to completely eradicate them from your mind and your personality. And this is what I suggested may be the cause for the way that my friend was feeling as she expressed in her TikTok. It may be a case of the residual persecution complex that Jehovah's Witnesses are indoctrinated to have. So after spending a while making my response on TikTok and thinking about the JW persecution complex, I thought it might be a good idea to do a podcast episode about it. So I guess the first thing we should do is define this word. What is persecution? The Oxford English Dictionary defines persecution as hostility and ill treatment, especially on the basis of ethnicity, religion, or sexual orientation or political beliefs. And Wikipedia defines persecution as the systematic mistreatment of an individual or group by another individual or group. So now that we understand what we're talking about, I guess the first question we should ask is, do Jehovah's Witnesses face persecution for their beliefs? And the answer to that question is yes. It is a true statement that in some parts of the world, Jehovah's Witnesses have historically faced and are currently facing persecution for their religion. And the severity of such persecution does vary from place to place. I've personally visited 2 countries where the religion itself is banned. The most notable example in recent times is the ban in Russia. The Russian Federation banned Jehovah's Witnesses as an extremist organization in April of 2017. Now, whether or not you agree with Russia's ban on Jehovah's Witnesses and their reasons for it, if we're being reasonable, as I always try to be when critiquing this religion, I think that banning the religion does fall within the definition of persecution. However, having said all of that, and I speak from personal experience as a former Jehovah's Witness when I say this, Jehovah's Witnesses view certain types of treatment as persecution when in fact they are not. And by far the biggest example of this is how they view negative publicity as it relates to child sexual abuse within the religion. Since the advent of the internet, social media, and 24/7 access to the news, the religion's problem with CSA is something that is getting more and more negative media attention, and quite rightly so. But Jehovah's Witnesses are encouraged by their leaders to view this negative publicity as persecution itself. Now, this is utterly ridiculous for three reasons. Firstly, reporting on a case of CSA can hardly be deemed as persecution if that case is actually true. If I were to walk out of my house right now and murder the first person I see, can I claim to be persecuted when my actions appear on the evening news? Of course not. That's ridiculous. Secondly, much of the criticism that the religion gets when it relates to CSA isn't just the fact that CSA happens, it's how the religion deals with it. The religion's child protection policies are absolutely atrocious. There's a culture of not reporting allegations of CSA to the police unless they're required to by law. If not, it's swept under the rug. They don't take abuse allegations seriously unless there are two witnesses to the abuse. And victims who speak out publicly about their experiences or refuse to worship alongside their abusers are often shunned. So I think it's fair to say that the religion's policies favor the abuser rather than the abused. And it's this fact that gets them the most criticism, which leads me on to the third point. Being held accountable for your actions is not persecution. If a person, religion, or any other kind of organization behaves badly and they are subsequently held accountable for their bad behavior, they can't claim persecution. It's ridiculous to say otherwise. So now that we've understood all of this, let's answer the question. Is the persecution they face evidence that they have the one true religion? No, it isn't. And to understand why they think that, we have to go way back to the beginning of the Bible, right back to the Garden of Eden. So let's set the scene. Adam and Eve have just committed the first sin of disobedience to Jehovah God. They've eaten the fruit from the forbidden tree, and Jehovah is now about to pronounce judgment on Adam, Eve, and the serpent who deceived them. So this is what Jehovah says in Genesis chapter 3 and verse 15. And I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and her offspring. He will crush your head, and you will strike him in the heel. Now, Jehovah's Witnesses take this verse to be a prophecy. And to explain how they interpret this prophecy, I'm going to refer to the June 1st, 1996 edition of the Watchtower. In the article, The Serpent's Seed, How Exposed, this is what it says in paragraph 3. And I quote, "To appreciate its significance, consider the various elements of the prophecy itself. The one addressed at Genesis 3:15 is the serpent, not the lowly snake, but the one who used it. The woman is not Eve, but Jehovah's heavenly organization, the mother of his spirit-anointed servants on earth. The serpent's seed is Satan's seed, his offspring, demons and all humans, as well as human organizations that manifest the traits of Satan and that show enmity toward the seed of the woman. The woman's seed is primarily Jesus Christ, who was anointed with Holy Spirit in 29 CE. The 144,000 who are born again from water and spirit and who are heirs of the heavenly kingdom with Christ are a subsidiary part of that seed of promise. These began to be added to the woman's seed from Pentecost 33 CE onward. End quote. Now there's an awful lot to unpack there, but I'll try to simplify it as much as possible. Throughout all of human history, right from the Garden of Eden up until this very day, there's been an ongoing conflict between the woman, the serpent, and their respective offsprings. The woman represents Jehovah's heavenly organization, and her seed represents Jesus Christ, as well as the Spirit-anointed 144,000. The serpent represents Satan the devil, and his seed represents the demons, as well as humans, individual humans, and human-led organizations that either knowingly or unknowingly serve Satan the devil. Now, since Jehovah's Witnesses believe that their religion is led by Jesus and the governing body who are part of this 144,000, each time the religion is quote-unquote persecuted by any part of Satan's seed, whether that be the media, apostates, or worldly governments, it feeds into this entire narrative of the conflict between the two seeds, and they see it as confirmation of this prophecy. So it stands to reason that if Bible prophecy is being fulfilled by way of persecution, they're going to look for persecution everywhere they possibly can. Their beliefs actually incentivize them being a persecuted group because it feeds into their confirmation bias. But there's another, even simpler reason that we can refute this claim, and that is that Jehovah's Witnesses are not the only Christians that are persecuted for their religion. According to Wikipedia, as of now, Christians are currently being persecuted in Burma, China, Eritrea, India, Iran, Nigeria, North Korea, Pakistan, Russia, Saudi Arabia, Syria, Vietnam, Afghanistan, Algeria, Azerbaijan, Bahrain, Cuba, Egypt, Indonesia, Iraq, Kazakhstan, Malaysia, Sudan, Turkey, Somalia, and Myanmar. So if being a Christian and being persecuted were evidence that you had the one true religion, then virtually all denominations of Christianity would be the one true religion. That makes no sense, especially when you consider the fact that most Christian denominations either fail to agree with each other or outrightly contradict each other's doctrines. Moving on to our third and final point, let's talk about their belief that the persecution they face will increase in severity in the near future. Why do they even believe this? To add a bit of background to this, we need to examine chapter 17 of the book of Revelation. Now, this chapter speaks of a wild beast and a great harlot, and Jehovah's Witnesses believe that this passage of scripture is prophetic in nature, and the wild beast represents, believe it or not, the United Nations, and the great harlot represents the world empire of false religion. To put it simply, all religions that aren't Jehovah's Witnesses. They also believe that in the very near to immediate future, the United Nations are going to turn on all religions in the world, effectively destroying them and enacting a worldwide ban on organized religion. And once false religion has been completely destroyed, the United Nations are going to realize that Jehovah's Witnesses are still around. They are going to be largely unaffected by the devastation that has befallen false religion, And once they realize that, they are going to specifically attack Jehovah's Witnesses, which will then kickstart the War of Armageddon. As I said earlier, Jehovah's Witnesses believe that all of these events have been set out in Bible prophecy beforehand, and they will actually come true in the very near future. So they are expecting the persecution they currently face to get worse as that time draws near. This aspect of their beliefs is something that they've been focusing on more and more in recent years. At the 2016 annual convention of Jehovah's Witnesses, they released a series of videos that depicted future scenes of Jehovah's Witnesses being persecuted. And believe it or not, Jehovah's Witnesses huddled together in a bunker, hiding from the authorities who were seeking them out. I kid you not, this video featured SWAT teams going from house to house searching for witnesses, secret door knocks, and a secret bunker where Jehovah's Witnesses were hiding from the authorities. This is their vision of the very near future. Also, just in the past couple of weeks, some pictures were leaked online of the upcoming annual convention. And these pictures featured the United Nations General Assembly Hall with a huge video screen where they were reviewing pictures of the governing body members. The idea being put forward by that image is that in the very near future, the United Nations are going to specifically target Jehovah's Witnesses, in particular, the members of the governing body, to such an extent that they are going to be discussing them in the General Assembly. Okay, now that we've established that background, let's answer the question. Is the persecution that Jehovah's Witnesses face likely to increase in severity in the near future? No. And here's why. Nobody cares about Jehovah's Witnesses. There are no secret government rooms, much less the UN General Assembly, where Jehovah's Witnesses or the governing body are being discussed. Given what's going on in the world in recent months, I think it's fair to say that the UN have much bigger fish to fry. When I left the religion in 2019, one of the biggest realizations that I came to was how little the world in general knows, much less cares, about Jehovah's Witnesses as a religion. The religion teaches its members to think that everything that happens in the world is ultimately about them. But in reality, nothing could be further from the truth. As someone who engages in activism both on and offline, I can attest to this fact. I have personally tried to raise awareness about the harmful practices of this religion to the institutions of quote-unquote Satan's world. And by and large, my efforts and the efforts of my fellow activists consistently hit a brick wall. And the reason for that is that nobody cares about Jehovah's Witnesses. I don't know how many times I have to say it. By and large, the world in general views Jehovah's Witnesses as being quirky, odd, but completely benign. They almost completely fly under the radar as even being a cult, let alone as being an organization that the world's governments need to be worried about. Jehovah's Witnesses, as a religion, are not on anybody's radar. If the world's governments, as represented by the United Nations, were going to be worried about any of the world's religions potentially being a threat to global peace and stability, I can think of at least one religion that they would be more focused on. Jehovah's Witnesses wouldn't even make it onto the top 10, not even the top 20 of that list, because the world in general sees them as being a bit weird but harmless. This entire narrative that they have of future persecution is just so ridiculous and bizarre. It's completely laughable. It's nothing more than fantasy. And I really don't know what else to say about it other than that. But I would really like to know what you think about this subject. Please share your thoughts by leaving a comment below. And if you haven't already done so, please subscribe to the podcast. It really helps to get it in front of as many listeners as possible. Thank you so much for listening. I really hope that you all have a great week.